honestly, this is the first thing that felt like I would need a phone. Like, you can go to day-to-day life, you can get a notification, you could be looking at Twitter, you could be watching a game, and you could be going about your day-to-day life. And now I am a degenerate that gets myself in trouble because thank goodness I live in a very quiet neighborhood in Taipei with very little traffic, because I'd probably kill myself walking my dog as I'm holding my phone and scrolling through Twitter and my group chat, right? Now I could do this with my hands free. And by the way, it's not just hands free, it's that I have a high fidelity of control, thanks in part to sort of this wrist thing. And it's like it's pretty compelling, and you can do more than you think. Now, obviously, a big part of this is the AI stuff, is the voice recognition. Text entry to me is a big question here. The wrist thing can track you, like you could do like handwriting, or you could track your wrist like you know a virtual keyboard. I kind of think they should use that puck. Like, maybe it's time for the BlackBerry keyboard to come back. Like, imagine like you had like little buttons on there, just for typing text. I think that would actually be pretty compelling. But so it's not there yet. But it's the first time I've ever used a device and say I could imagine using this instead. It's actually better than a phone in a number of respects. Again, this was a 30-minute demo. I use my phone, like, I think I got my activity notification that I was on my phone for 23 hours. Now there's a time zone change, but like, so
right. Yeah,
I don't want to
distracted you, but I will double down and request the keyboard, because I don't think that we're just going to be a post-text society in the next 10 or 15 years. I want to keep text a central part of the human experience, and having input and keyboards are going to be important. So,
right. And by the way, if Apple ships something like this, that puck's going to be an iPhone. It's not going to be a puck, right? And you'll have the input there. They have this big advantage by virtue of owning sort of a smartphone, and that's going to be a real challenge for Meta, assuming sort of Apple responds here. But to go back to the Windows versus Mac sort of thing, what is shipping right now are a bunch of Oculuses, and the Oculus 3 is $500, which Meta sort of said is more than they wanted. Now they have the 3S, which is $299. Again, it's low resolution, but it has the full pass-through where you can see around you in color. Again, it's not Vision Pro, but it's perfectly viable for feeling like you have a headset on and be a functioning member of a household, right? Without like just disappearing like you would with sort of the original Quest 2. And on there's stuff to do. Now, again, do I use the Quest a lot? No, not really. I also don't play console games or watch that much TV, as we've talked about, right? Like, so, but there's games you can play. They announced a partnership with Microsoft where you can have the Windows environment in there. Like, you've always been able to cast the screen, either a Mac or a Windows screen, into this. This is like Microsoft like takes over, and it's like you're in a fully Windows sort of 3D environment, which is a partnership that sort of makes sense given the sort of competitive realities there. But there's stuff to do. And the thing about the smartphone is Apple was first with their sort of high-end integrated solution. They got a huge developer ecosystem, and then Android came later and sort of caught up, but it didn't surpass. You ended up with two winners. As I've talked about with PCs, Microsoft was first. They weren't first with the GUI. They were first, though, with DOS. And all those DOS applications ran on Windows as well. Once sort of Windows came along, it was backwards compatible. And the Mac was higher priced, more expensive, quote unquote better, but it didn't have the ecosystem that sort of Windows did. And Meta, by having lower cost devices, by being in the market for a long time, now, is that ecosystem meaningful enough? TBD. But they have a much larger ecosystem for sure than Apple does for the Vision Pro. It's primed to get larger just thanks to the price point alone. And I would assume a lot of what you're doing in sort of for the Quest are going to be transferable to a device like this. So they have an ecosystem advantage. So that's why it feels like, again, I don't know what Apple's working on, but the Vision Pro at $4,000, that it feels like the wrong direction. They made the wrong trade-offs. They wanted to make this amazing pass-through experience. Guess what's better than having an LCD display or whatever with these weird eyes on it.
Mhm.
Actually seeing people's eyes. Turns
Seeing
out
the
that
world.
that's a better solution. Yeah.
It's wild. I mean, you can just see people's eyes as they're using it, and it feels a lot less alienating and antisocial than what Apple debuted.
Right, you can be sneakily antisocial. You could be like
Right.
going through your Instagram feed.
It
And
is
no one knows any
antisocial,
better.
let's be clear, but it's at least less blatant about it. Well, sticking with the Apple theme, I'll read this tweet from Neil Seibert, who covers Apple. Imagine if Tim Cook got on stage, unveiled a prototype headset that won't be sold to consumers because Apple couldn't figure out how to manufacture it at scale, and then claimed Apple is leading with such innovation. People would call for Cook's resignation, and rightly so, he puts in parentheses. Just for the record, the Apple community does not get to make jokes about the Android lovers of the world, because the Apple community is every bit as sensitive. Anytime Apple is challenged in one way or another, you get these passive aggressive, snarky tweets. And there was a lot of that coming from the Apple fanboys in the wake of Zuckerberg's presentation on Wednesday. But that aside, I'm curious, from a business standpoint, why would Meta debut this and have all these different journalists try on the Orion glasses if they are in fact 3 or 4 years away from coming to market? It was reported that a set of glasses now costs $10,000, so nowhere near being ready to sell at scale. Why do it now?
Well, number one, I think they have buyers at $10,000. Number two, I'm going to defend
like
Neil. I'm going to defend Neil Seibert here. It's a fair take. Like, why are you like? And Apple fans have fairly made fun of companies like Microsoft sort of back in the day for wheeling out these crazy concepts that are years away from shipping, that don't show up. And it's a very fair critique. Again, Apple might have this technology working in their labs. They're not going to show it until it ships, and that is a credit to Apple, and it's a fair critique here. So why did they do it? I don't know for sure. My sense is twofold. Number one, it really feels like they cracked it. Like this is the direction to go. And that justifies the billions and billions of dollars they've been spending on this arena for all this time. And there's been a lot of pressure on them about the spending on Reality Labs. They changed the name, and then over the next year, their stock went into the absolute gutter, and like, oh, they're done, and they're just wasting all this money, all these sorts of things. Their stock's back up because people realize sort of how strong their core business is, but there's still a lot of folks are like, yeah, that's a zero, right? Like, whatever. Mm-hmm. The rest of the company's so good, we will tolerate them throwing $10 billion away.
Had we talked about this 72 hours ago, that would have been my take to you. It's like they've just lit $30 billion on fire and still have no revenue to show for it.
I think there's a bit where they bought themselves a lot of breathing room with this. And so that may be a motivation, and it's an understandable motivation. It's also not a great one, because this should be a massive kick in the pants for Apple. It should be a real wake-up call. And you might get in a situation where I've talked about when Amazon had to reveal the AWS numbers, because like they basically, the SEC, in many respects forced them to. It was a material part of their business. They couldn't be sort of burying it. It was a separate division that reported the CEO. Pretty cut and dry. You need to actually report these numbers. And when they did, it spurred an astronomical competitive response, particularly from Microsoft. Holy crap, they're number one, making a lot of money, and number two, it's really profitable. We all thought Amazon's like selling it at like 5% margins. Fine, Amazon could do that. We can't afford it. Oh, wait, they're making 40% margins? Wait, what's going on here? Massive competitive response. And I think that Meta absolutely risked this. You look at the Vision Pro, and like I said, I think Apple's going the wrong direction. They made the wrong trade-offs. They prioritize this super high resolution that at the end of the day is just infinitely inferior to real life resolution. And right. I think it'd be better off with a lower, more accessible headset that builds up an ecosystem like Meta's doing, so that when they can ship something like this, they have all that stuff sort of ready to go. And this should be a wake-up call to Apple to sort of rethink their approach, in my opinion. And that's going to be a big cost to Meta. But I think it kind of ties into the live demos. It ties into Mark Zuckerberg saying, "Oh, whatever, just go for it. We'll deal with it. We'll deal with what happens when it happens." The thing is, part of what made that keynote great is Orion was amazing, but it was the last 10 minutes. Like that whole keynote was great. All the Ray-Ban stuff you mentioned, the real live, like you had two people with the Ray-Ban glasses talking in different languages to each other because they're getting real time translation in their ears. That's incredible. That's sort of an amazing sort of capability. The Quest 3S, like a $300 device that can do what that does, super cool. I thought this Microsoft connection relationship was super compelling. They spent like 30 seconds on it. Like there was plenty for a good keynote here. They did like all the Llama stuff and the AI stuff and all this sorts of thing. And yet they added this on. And again, it took this keynote from like great to spectacular. But I think there was a bit of, hey, like it sounds like they really got this working about 4 or 5 months ago, maybe 6 months ago. I had heard sort of through the grapevine that no, they got it. Like they figured it out. And, that is why it was a reason to sort of, there's a certain, you have to go to certain events because like there's just like something that's going to be worth it. That's why, the Vision Pro event, like I had to make sure I was there. One of my great regrets in my trajectory career was not going to the initial Apple Watch event. And this was sort of one of those, but yeah, why not? I think Facebook is a real why not company these days. And I think that goes into it as well.
Well, yeah. And,